Well, good evening, everybody. You came back. Wow. Well, last week we had a very interesting guest speaker, Richard Bennett, former Catholic priest of many years, lived in Trinidad where he practiced mostly, and I just thought he delivered a very moving testimony as well as a very powerful presentation. And I don't know about you, but I could really feel the pain that he has suffered just throughout his journey. And one thing that I came back away with after I talked to him later on that night, as well as taking him to the airport, is that I am just so convinced that this man deeply loves Catholic people. He does. In fact, many of you know we've been showing clips of retired Catholic priest Tom Leland, and I called Tom on Friday to hear what he thought. He was here last week. And he said the same thing. He said, a lot of it was difficult to listen to. But he felt that he spoke with, experience, obviously. He's got a lot of history, a lot of experience, and definitely he really felt that there was a deep love for Catholics. And so that was the spirit that I was hoping was going to be going out. So, and I can tell you that, apart from the main stage presentation that he gave last week, Richard and I talked about other things about just Christianity in general. I can tell you that we don't see eye to eye on certain things. We really don't. But I think that the presentation he gave was very accurate, even though it might have been painful. But we talked about some other differences that we had, and let me just say this for the record. For the record at Cedar Creek, myself and Cedar Creek, we don't believe, and I don't believe, that a person's eternal destiny depends upon what religion they belong to, what church they attend. It's based upon the faith that they have in the God of the Bible and what He has to say. That's our stance at Cedar Creek. So I just want to set that for the record straight. Now, I mentioned the first week that we probably have, I don't know the exact numbers, but we have a lot of former Catholics that attend Cedar Creek. And it's interesting because they send us comments and questions, and when we do our survey a couple times a year, they actually give us a lot of feedback about kind of their background, their history in the Catholic faith and with their families. And I've talked to many of them. And one thing that seems to be common is that when a person leaves the Catholic Church, or really I think for any church that is, quote, the family church, well, let's just say it can create a lot of tension.
Honey, where are you going?
I'm going to Home Depot.
You're going to go to Home Depot right now. Seriously.
I won't be gone long.
Honey, why is it that whenever my parents come into town, you suddenly get the urge to buy power tools?
Well, maybe because among other things, your parents bring out the carpenter in me.
Actually, I think they bring out the chicken in you. We're cleaning. Let's go. Look.
But the place looks fine.
No, it's totally filthy.
Where?
I don't know, Brian, but you know my mom. She's gonna find it, so let's clean.
You see, this is why I go to Home Depot.
So you don't have to clean?
No, so I don't have to sit here and argue with you.
The Bible. Oh, hide it, hurry.
Cheryl.
What?
Hiding this won't do any good.
It might.
It won't.
Well, listen, if we put the Bible away, if we forget about eating, saying grace,
if we just magically move to another country.
No, I just think we need to avoid the topic of religion altogether.
That would be a minor miracle.
True, but honey, how else are we going to have a nice evening? Come on.
Nice evening? Uh-huh.
Frank, will you please slow down?
I am only going 10 miles an hour over the speed limit.
Well, I'd like to see my daughter one last time before I die. Oh my gosh, Frank, watch out! Oh.
I see it, Helen. I'm not blind.
Jesus, Mary, Joseph, pray for us.
And we're not dying yet either. Although that would be a solution.
Frank!
What? You're excited about this dinner?
Frank, we are not going there to fight.
Well, I am not going to sit idly by while
Oh, yes, you are. We are going to talk about the weather. We are going to talk about their little apartment. Hopefully she's cleaned it. We are going to talk about anything but religion. We are going to have a nice evening, Frank.
Uh-huh.
It's going to be a terrible evening.
Honey, would you just try to relax?
Brian, how can I? I have committed an unpardonable sin.
That is not true.
Yes, it is. I've left the church.
You haven't left the church. You've just chosen a different denomination.
Honey, in the eyes of my parents, there's only one way to live. Once a Catholic, always a Catholic.
Uh-huh. Yeah, you know what? They blame me, you know.
I blame him, you know.
We don't know it was him.
Well, who else would put these crazy ideas in her head? I mean, you just don't up and leave the church for no reason. I mean, a church started by St. Peter himself. I just don't understand it.
She seems, well, they both seem quite devoted to this other church.
The Catholic Church has hundreds of years of history. You just don't turn your back on God's church, a church that's brought meaning to the lives of millions.
Frank, you know Cheryl. She's always been curious. She's always tried new things and asked questions.
Yeah, it's one thing to ask questions. It's another thing to question your faith.
You know, I feel like I was never even allowed to ask questions. I really don't even remember reading the Bible, Brian. I don't know. Sometimes I feel as though if I hadn't have left the Catholic Church, I might never have understood the message of salvation. Brian, I need my parents to understand that too.
She doesn't even think we're Christian anymore. I mean, I've devoted my whole life to the church. I sent her to Catholic school. I tried to do everything right. And now, what, now I'm the one going to hell? How could she possibly believe that?
You know we're going to hell.
Honey, they're just upset because the thing that used to bring you guys together, now it seems to be pulling you apart.
Honey brought us together. Church is just something we did. We had to do it.
I remember holding Cheryl at her baptism. Oh, she was so beautiful in that little white gown. Oh, and her first communion. Oh, it was so special for her. Well, for all of us. Remember how the girls used to fight over who could make the most beautiful crown for Mary? Oh, I miss going to Mass together as a family. I miss taking the Eucharist together.
We're just not a family anymore.
Brian, I love my mom and dad, you know? We used to be so close.
Listen,
and now we're just...
listen. We can try talking to them again.
Honey, we'll just end up fighting.
Maybe we could talk to her.
No, we'll just end up yelling.
Oh my gosh, they're here. Okay.
We're here.
All right. Okay. Remember.
We are going to talk about the weather.
Okay, we are going to talk about anything. Anything
But
religion.
All right. Well, like I said, we had, we have a lot of people that have submitted, questions and, comments on the survey, and so I just want to read a few of these. I want to invite our panelists going to be speaking here in a minute or two, just to come on up, and but I'm going to just read a couple of the comments that we've received over the years. Here's one here. It says, "Since I was brought up in a very Catholic family, I feel somewhat guilty for coming to a new church. I guess I just want to make sure I'm not giving up on my Catholic upbringing. I don't want to compromise my beliefs." Wow. Here's one that says, "I'd like to get more involved, but I'm struggling with my Catholic upbringing." And like I said, these are people who have written this, and in fact, in your binders, in the front page and also toward the end, there's probably about 100 of these quotes in there from people who have submitted these. Then the third one is this. It says, "I am Catholic. I want to try something different. Have to get something inside me. I love God, but need something. I need His love. Can you help me?" And, I think it's no secret that sometimes people can feel distant from God no matter what church they're part of, because your relationship with God is a personal thing, don't you think? It's a personal thing between you and God. And sometimes your environment can either help you get closer to God or just confuse you. And so we just want to say that we know that there are some people here. These three individuals I'm going to introduce here are people who have ended up at Cedar Creek that grew up in very strong, devout Catholic families. And I thought it would be really good to just maybe let them tell a little bit about their journey and maybe some of the difficulties and struggles that they've had when they left their church and ended up here. So let me introduce, first of all, Nick Martinez here. Nick and I just got a chance to go to Honduras together just a couple months ago and had a great time down there. And does anybody know the girl in the middle? The girl. Isn't she cute? What a cute little girl. Lauren Miller, she's been part of Cedar Creek for a long time, and you probably hear her awesome, amazing voice. But she's an amazing person, too. You're going to find out in just a second. How about that? And then Ed McCauley. Anybody recognize his face? Mr. McCauley himself, Ed here in the flesh. Not in a negative way in the flesh, but here he is. And so, I just wanted to ask you guys, boy, woo, there's a runaway train here. I wanted to give them an opportunity to talk a little bit about their journey. And, maybe some of the difficulties they've had. And some of the questions I'm going to ask them tonight are questions that I've received since this class began. So, Nick, would you just start off by just kind of telling us a little bit about yourself and your journey and maybe how you ended up here?
Okay, my name is Nick Martinez, and I've actually come from a family of 10 siblings, born and raised in northern Colorado, and grew up Catholic. My dad was involved with the Catholic Church since I can remember, and he was a deacon within the church, and we never missed a Sunday, and went through the whole catechism, went through communion and confirmation, and grew up in a family that, bottom line, there was no decision whether you were going to go to church. You went to church, and there was no bones about it. And I don't think I ever remember missing church at all until one day. And again, just with the background, let me give you a little bit of background. Being of a Hispanic family, we're fourth-generation Americans, yet we're a strong tradition within the Mexican-American community with the Catholic background of following the saints. And those of you that have any background knowledge of Hispanics can relate to Catholics that follow the Virgin of Guadalupe. The Anglos have Virgin Mary, and we had the Virgin of Guadalupe. And the years I spent following the saints, learning about the saints, and I always remember my dad's favorite saint. I guess it was related to the name Martinez because it was Saint Martin that he always prayed to for special assistance. And if you heard the Richard Bennett speak last week about the apparition of the Virgin appearing in Denver, Colorado, I can tell you that was a true thing that the Catholics thought of at that particular point in time, because I remember going up those steps, racing up those probably about a quarter mile, almost straight up, going up those steps to pray to the Virgin Mary. And it was in West Denver, and we'd make a little journey every 2 years up there, and Mom and Dad would take all the kids, and that was our background. Background was such, though, that growing up in the era that I did, Mass was still held in Latin. So I had no idea what that priest was saying. And we were goofing off with our little buddies and our brothers in the back of the church if we could get away sitting in the back. And I think of all those years that I would go, but it was very mechanical. I would always pray, though, and that was one of the things that years later I would think about praying, especially using the rosary, because, again, as in Matthew 6, verse 7, it stuck with me when I read this years ago. And when you pray, do not keep on babbling like pagans, for they think they will be heard because of their many words. And that would put pressure on me, thinking, boy, you know what? Maybe all that time I was spent praying, I was praying wrong. And bottom line is, when I went to college at Colorado State University, and this was in the 70s, basically quit going to Mass. I just basically quit cold turkey and got away with it from the family. And for years did not go until ultimately in the late 70s. In 1979, I was attending a non-denominational church, much like this actually. And started hearing the word, started asking questions and saying, hey, all those years that I grew up as a Catholic, and again, growing up as a Catholic in my era and my location and being Hispanic, it was such a following that the Catholics, if you were Hispanic and weren't Catholic, there was something wrong with you. That's what we thought. And if we were invited to a Protestant church by a friend, I'll tell you what, in our family, you did not take your friend's invitation to go to that Protestant church because you would be considered a traitor. So from that standpoint, I started attending other churches, like what I heard about salvation and learning the true word, and actually got involved with intense study through Fundamental Baptist Church, and really was indoctrinated to reading the Word, following the Word, listening to the Word, and gave my life to Christ. And have grown since, and it's always been a battle to go up against the family with this background.
Yeah, we're gonna get into that too in a little bit, because I know that's very common with a lot of people.
So that gives you a little bit of background on
That's
myself.
good. Thanks, Nick. By the way, just curious, were you chanting the Rocky song as you were running up the steps? Rocky Balboa, never mind.
No.
Okay, never mind. Lauren,
Yes.
I would love for you to sing your story, but you can just talk about it if you like. So.
I'd
I
probably
just love her voice,
rather
don't you
sing
guys?
it. My story is kind of similar to yours, only my family's Italian, and my dad was first generation, and we were Roman Catholics as far back as anybody could be traced. That's
Real
just
Rome. We're talking
real
real Rome here.
Yes, real
Wow.
Rome. And my family's from Boston, and I would spend most of the summer in Boston with my grandmother, who was very devout. She had a statue of the Virgin Mary in her garden, and she prayed to her in Italian. I went to Latin Mass. She would get me up at 6 in the morning, and we would go down, and I'd have to wear the little doily on my head. And didn't quite understand the whole thing. But I loved the Mass because they sang it. And I would get in trouble all the time because I would sing the Eucharist with the priest. And that was not something you were supposed to do. I didn't know what I was saying, but I knew that I liked the way it sounded. And there was just something about it that I felt compelled that I had to sing it as well. For me, same as you went to church, whether you were sick, as long as you weren't dying, you were up out of bed and you were at Mass. And if you did not go, it was a sin. But I, from an early age, questioned a lot. I was, from what my mother would say, was the rebellious religious child, because I needed to know the why of everything.
Yeah, some people never change either.
Yeah, I still like to know the why of everything. So I questioned from a really young age. I think the biggest crossroad I came to was getting confirmed. We had to go and have confession with the priest, and it was when they first started face-to-face confessions, which was a little unnerving as it was. And my mother kept saying, "Do not embarrass me, do not embarrass me, do not embarrass me." And so
Could you give us some examples, possibly?
So my question to the priest was, I'm sinning now because I don't think I need to be here. And he asked if that was because I thought I was sinless. And I said, no, I just don't understand if what we hear about Jesus and that he died for our sins is true, why can't I talk to him myself? Because he already knows my sins. And that was not the right thing to say. I got kicked out of the confessional. I think I was probably the first person to ever have that happen. And of course, I got a lecture on the way home. But so I questioned from a very young age, but I still went because that was what you do. And when I went to college, I was free from having to go to Mass every Sunday, so I didn't go. But I missed church. I thought it was church I missed. And so after I graduated and got married, and I did not get married in the Catholic Church because I did not want, my husband was not Catholic, and I did not want to have to force him to go through all of that. So we got married in a non-denominational church. And after we got married, I went back to the church because I thought that was what was missing. And I thought, now that I was grown and an adult and married, and as I had my children, I thought that I would begin to find my place. I taught catechism. I went to church every Sunday. I sang in the choir. I'm the one that sang behind the brick wall next to the altar, which is kind of symbolic because that's how my whole relationship kind of felt with the Catholic Church. I always felt like I was on the outside looking in, trying to figure out where I fit. And as time went on and I had my family, I just had more and more questions and began to search, and then ended up here.
Mm-hmm. And we didn't know you could sing until, how did that all happen? When you talked about singing at church once.
Yes.
Yeah.
I sang in the Catholic choir, and most Catholic women that sing have very high, beautiful operatic voices, and that just was not my voice. So nobody ever said, oh, you can sing or you're going to sing this song. They were just gracious enough to let me participate. Yeah. And but I always loved to sing, and so when we came here, they were looking for vocalists, and my husband encouraged me to go and to hang out. And
that's when they were trying to get me off stage
yes,
and try to replace.
yeah.
I used to lead music at Cedar Creek. No joke. I used to lead music here. Okay, another story.
And so, so when I finally did sing, it took a while, and they told me either sing or leave, because you can't be a Cedar Creek groupie. And when I finally did sing, I was told I could sing, and I didn't believe them, but apparently they were right.
And she can sing. She can sing. Great. Ed McCauley. Tell us a little about yourself, Ed.
I'm the oldest of 8 children. My mom passed away about 3 years ago. My dad is a very, very devout Catholic. My brothers and sisters are still in a position right now where they are doing the famous try to find the shortest mass they can find in town. They've got a St. Timothy church in Columbus that's at 22 minutes on Sunday.
Wow, express.
They're very happy with that. But I love them each dearly, and I pray, every day that somehow, some way they can know the truth that I found out when I was 48 years old. Our household was really, it wasn't anything that was, when I was young especially, because I went to a Catholic grade school and Catholic high school. We did the Advent wreath, we did the Lenten penance, giving up something during Lent. Every one of the holidays, the religious holy days of obligation, we celebrated with Mass and with all the different things that were done according to church law were practiced in our home. I was an altar boy, and for probably 4 to 5 years of my life during grade school, I served Mass every day of the week. I served Mass in Latin from the 4th grade through the middle of my 5th grade, and then after that it went English. I felt like what happened to me with my Catholic education was something that I looked back on, and I felt like I had a superior education compared with the public schools, and for that I've always been grateful. My life at home ended up with similar struggles that Lauren had, where I really couldn't understand why the church was the way it was, because I knew that from what I had, the little I knew of Jesus at the time, because most of the church tells you what you're supposed to know and understand, that Jesus was a simple man that simply loved people so much that he suffered and died on the cross for their sins. But